You're in the freezing, flickering dark of a Paleolithic cave 30,000 years ago. Outside, the wind has weight. It howls across the tundra. The hunt is over. Your muscles burn, your stomach is full for once, and your mind is wide awake. You dig a small, polished ankle bone out of the dirt, pulled from a sheep you killed hours ago. You roll it in your palm, 4 sides. You throw it against the stone floor. It lands flat. You pick it up and throw it again. You're not killing time. You're playing the odds. You're inventing strategy without knowing that's what it is. This isn't a story about toys or leisure. It's about a survival trick wired into your skull. The thing that let our ancestors rehearse war, famine, and the raw chaos of the world without dying to learn the lesson. This is the history of the game. To understand why we play, start with the brutal arithmetic of the prehistoric world. Out there, energy is the most expensive thing you own. Every calorie you burn is one you have to replace through violence or hours of foraging. Spending it on something that doesn't feed you, shelter you, or get you a mate should be evolutionary suicide. And yet the predators at the top of the food chain all do it. Wolves, lions, primates, they wrestle, they stalk, they ambush each other in the tall grass. Play isn't wasted energy. It's a survival drill with the risk turned down. When a wolf pup pounces on its litter mate, it's firing the same circuits it'll need to tear out a deer's throat. It's building timing and instinct and spatial sense, all without the part where a real hunt can kill you. But humans aren't just hunters. We're social, scheming, abstract animals. We didn't only need to learn to bite and claw, we needed to outthink our prey, ration scarce food, and read the lies on another human's face. Same biology, same muscle, same code. The playground just had to get more complicated, so we built a sandbox for the mind. Before cities, before farms, there was the knuckle bone. Archaeologists call them astrogale, the ankle bones of sheep, goats, and deer. They're lopsided by nature, so a thrown astragalus settles on one of 4 faces. Thousands of years before anyone cut a 6-sided die, people were fishing these bones out of the ash of their cooking fires and throwing them. We find them in Paleolithic caves. We find them tucked into Neolithic graves. At first, nobody was playing. They were reading the future. The world of the hunter-gatherer was terrifyingly unpredictable. Drought, plague, herds that moved on, a blizzard out of nowhere. Throwing the bones was a way to force an answer out of a silent universe. The gods held the bones. The gods decided how they fell. Then, over a very long time, something shifted in the human head. The brain, soaking in the dopamine of not knowing, started to see the throw differently. It wasn't a message anymore. It was a probability. It was a risk. We stopped asking the bones about the future. We started betting on it. That's the birth of the game of chance, and it ran straight into the brain's reward system. The same loop that lit up when an ancestor found a rare patch of ripe berries. Dopamine doesn't only fire when you get the reward. It fires harder when you're about to. The hang of the bone in the air, the clatter on stone, the half-second before it settles. Pure chemical thrill. Once we learned to make that feeling on demand, we were hooked. Chance wasn't enough, though. The real turn came when the ice pulled back, the world warmed, and we made the most dangerous decision in our history. We stopped moving. We planted wheat. We built walls. We became farmers. Farming wrecked us in some way. It thinned our bones, packed us into filthy settlements, and handed us famine on a scale we'd never known. But it gave us one enormous new idea: surplus. For the first time, there was grain in the silo. There was property. There was a hierarchy. There were armies. The rules of survival had changed, so the simulations had to change with them. We needed games about more than luck. We needed games about strategy. Look at Africa, home to some of the oldest game boards ever found. Mancala. Not one game, but a whole family of them, played by scooping seeds or pebbles and dropping them around rows of shallow pits cut into earth, wood, or stone. We've found ancient boards worn into the rock floors of ruins in Jordan and Egypt, thousands of years old. Mancala isn't a war game. It's a farming game. Sowing, harvesting, counting your seed. It demands you think several moves ahead and do the math while you do it. Manage your surplus better than the person across from you, and you starve them out. It's the hard logic of the Neolithic village, boiled down to a fistful of stones. Thousands of miles away, in the river valleys of Mesopotamia and along the Nile, societies were getting far more complicated. Kings ruled tens of thousands, scribes tracked taxes, armies marched in bronze, and the games grew to match the strange new order. In Egypt, they played senet, 30 squares in a grid. We've found senet boards in the tombs of pharaohs and scratched into the walls of peasant houses. It was more than a race to the finish line. It mapped the soul's passage through the underworld, past the traps the gods laid down, but it was also a knife fight in miniature. You blocked, you attacked, you forced the other player backward, square by square. Egyptian politics, dressed up in religion. Wherever people built a civilization, they seemed to have invented a board game to survive the stress of it. Nobody was copying anyone. They just kept arriving at the same idea. Then the games merged with humanity's oldest obsession, war. As empires spread, the board became a battlefield. In India, that meant chaturanga, the ancestor of chess. It didn't model farming, it modeled the four arms of the Indian military. Foot soldiers, cavalry, elephants, chariots. No dice, no gods, just one mind against another. It taught commanders to spend the weak to save the strong and drilled them in the ugly math of the retreat and the flanking attack. Across the ocean, in the jungles of Mesoamerica, the Maya and the Aztecs played something that stopped pretending to be a simulation at all. The ball game. Fought in huge stone courts with a solid rubber ball, it was a savage contest. Players hurled themselves at the ground, driving the ball with their hips and torsos. That ball could weigh 9 pounds. It cracked ribs. It caused internal bleeding that killed people. And it wasn't only a sport, it was a war you could fight without an army. In a world where a real campaign might wipe out the farmers a city depended on, the ball game settled land disputes, trade deals, and political grudges instead. The stakes were total. On the court, the game stood in for the cosmic fight between the sun and the underworld. After the biggest matches, the losers, and sometimes the winners, were led away and beheaded. Their blood went into the soil so the maize would rise. They took the catastrophe of war and shrank it onto a court. The game saved the city. The game demanded blood. To feel how tightly these games gripped the ancient mind, look down into the dirt of southern Iraq. It's 1922. The British archaeologist Leonard Woolley is digging at Ur, a Sumerian city that was already old 5,000 years ago. The heat is suffocating. The dust gets into the lungs. His team cuts through packed earth into the horror and the wealth of the buried world. They find the death pits, dozens of servants, soldiers, and musicians poisoned and laid out in neat rows to follow their king into the afterlife. And there, among the gold and the lapis and the smashed skulls of the sacrificed, they find it. A wooden board inlaid with squares of shell, red limestone, and blue lapis. Beside it, 14 pieces, 7 black and 7 white, and a set of 4-sided dice. The royal game of Ur. No cheap trinket this? A masterpiece, buried with a king for the trip into eternity. And for decades, its rules were a ghost. We had the board and no idea how it worked. Then a curator at the British Museum translated a cracked clay tablet, cuneiform pressed into it by a Babylonian scribe around 177 BC. The tablet described a fast, vicious little game. A race where you rolled, moved along a set path, and knocked your opponent's pieces clean off the board, sending them back to the start. A game built on sudden, total reversals. You could be 1 square from winning and get thrown back into the mud by a single unlucky roll, which made it a near-perfect mirror of life in the ancient Near East. One day you're a rich merchant. The next, the river floods, an army burns your fields, or the king simply takes what you have. The game taught the Sumerian mind to swallow the cruelty of fate, to pounce on an enemy's bad luck, and to start over from nothing. Soldiers played it in the barracks. Kings played it in the palace. The dead carried it into the dark. Now you sit in a climate-controlled room, staring at a glowing screen, a plastic controller in your hands. You're pushing armies of pixels around. You're watching cooldown timers. You're running a digital economy, moving through spaces that don't exist, firing, ducking behind cover, guessing where an enemy you can't see is about to appear. You think you've evolved past the cave. You think the tech rewired the animal. It didn't. When your heart rate jumps in the last seconds of a match, when your pupils widen, when the dopamine hits after the win, your brain can't tell the difference between a digital battlefield and the tall grass of the Pleistocene. You're running the same chemistry that drove the hunters at the beginning. You're throwing the astragali. You're sliding the lapis across the board. We stopped fighting predators. We stopped running from the cold. But we never stopped needing the simulation, and we never stopped needing the risk. We made it through the whole savage gauntlet of natural history because we learned to take the chaos of the world and squeeze it into rules we could master. We're the apex predator, and we're never going to stop playing.